Good morning, Dan. How are you?
Hey, John. How's it going, mate?
I'm fantastic, man. It is episode 9 of the SmartB Sports Update podcast. Perfection. So it only takes 9 times before I get it right. It's episode 9, right?
Yeah, it is episode 9.
Cool. This time I got it right. It's been awesome this weekend. A lot of upsets. A lot of what you expect to happen.
Yeah, just so much to get through. Very much to get through.
I thought it would be small, but it actually ended up being... I've got 4 pages of notes.
Yeah, I've got 7. John,
jeez. You always do the stats, though. See what's happening. So let's kick off with the Storm and the Roosters. So Friday night we had Storm and the Roosters, and we also had in the AFL at the same time Melbourne versus Carlton at exactly the same time.
Yeah.
I was trying to watch them both at the same time, but unfortunately KO had an issue for everyone. It was all over the internet. No one could log in. Yeah, it was pathetic. So I didn't get in until just after half time.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I couldn't watch the whole game. But what I did watch, it actually looked like a pretty good game. And the second half was, I think, pretty fun, like a pretty good, intense game. But yeah, obviously the end result was Roosters got beat. I think they made a massive tactical error taking their field goal shot with 8 minutes to go. They were up 13. Well, there was 12 all, and they were up. They took that field goal and then thought, we could treat this like the Sharks and defend it out for 8 minutes. But it's Melbourne. Melbourne are notorious. I'd love to see a stat on how many times Melbourne have won in the last minute.
Yeah, you're right, John. I mean, I think the closeness of the game certainly kept it interesting. To be honest, John, I was left feeling that Melbourne were very lucky to get through that game. Like you said, until 2 minutes to go, the Roosters were going to be in the preliminary final. That late try from Will Warbrick off that Cameron Munster kick, sending the Storm through again. I think they were very lucky. I think Munster was off his game again. There was one occasion in the second half where he just couldn't get to his kick on the last. Harry Grant was off as well. There was an occasion there where he's just, at a key moment in the second half, threw a poor pass that went to ground. It was knocked on. And there was another knock-on that was missed by Ashley Klein.
That was terrible. I saw that later in posts, highlights, and obviously in the news. It's well covered.
Yeah.
I suppose his excuse was, I can only play what's in front of me or something like that. Yeah, that's in front of you, bro.
Yeah. I mean, it was a terrible mistake from the referee, and it led to that Storm try. So, that's not what you want in a big game. But, I guess well done to the Storm. They did get through. Of course, Jerome Hughes was ruled out on Thursday night after our show. With that calf injury, Tyron Wishart came in, did okay.
Yeah, he did good job for his
scored
first year.
Scored that try early. Just the second try of his career. Yeah, he made 18 tackles and ran for 87 metres as well. So
yeah, it's he's young, obviously. He's just the son of Rod Wishart, son of a legend, Steelers legend. But I was watching it with no commentary because, to tell you the truth, I was at my children's school play, and rather than watching the school play, I was watching the football. But yeah, that last minute Storm win is such a notorious thing, they just always seem to manage to make that happen in that last minute. If they're down less than one converted try down, then they will manage to win in the last minute. And I think the Roosters needed to understand this and not go, look, there's 8 minutes to go, let's kick a field goal and try and defend out this field goal. I think at that point they should have chased the try.
You make a good point on the field goal, John. I think the problem with the early field goal, and we've seen it in the past, is a field goal sort of draws a line in the sand. It has that psychological effect on the team. The team sort of go, we're done for the night. We're just going to, as you said before, we're just going to try and defend our way to victory here.
Yeah, and it's all right if you're 7 points up against the Storm. But it's never okay if you're 1 point up against the Storm.
Yeah.
Especially in that last 10 minutes, 8 minutes, 7 minutes. As the clock's ticking down, the Storm will just find the way to do that. And did they even go for a field goal? I can't 100% remember. The Storm went the Storm didn't get into this mentality of we can send it into golden point overtime or anything like that. They just went, let's score a try. And of course, that's what they always do.
Yeah, I think there were times where they set for a field goal. They went to Munster setting for a field goal, but I don't think he took an attempt. He was looking elsewhere. He was looking for try-scoring opportunities. And unfortunately for the Roosters, he did find one, finding Warbrick with that bomb.
That was a good try. It was a good kick as well.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
And that's just the stupidity, tactical blunder, I think. I can't stress it enough. It was just a tactical blunder. They did the same thing against the Sharks last week, kicked a field goal with 7 minutes to go, and that was fine because it's the Sharks.
Yeah, that's right.
No matter how badly Melbourne is playing, they will always find a way to win. And there was that period of time where they won, like, whatever it was, like 36,000 matches in a row in Melbourne. And I remember even there was ones where there was actually the Bulldogs were about to win, and Melbourne scored in like the last 10 seconds and things like that. Like, it's just, it's always...
Yeah, I think that one you're talking about, I think that was 1999, yeah. I think it was actually Ricky Stewart playing for the Bulldogs at the time, put in a grubber, kick to open space, and I think Melbourne... It is hard to remember now who picked it up. I think it was... I think Brett Kamali might have got onto the grubber and then found Marcus Bai for a try. It's a very long time ago.
That is a very typical thing that Melbourne have done in the history of Melbourne. Like, even when they, very early years and they were bad, they still managed to, you can't count them out by being 1 point ahead. You know, it'd be great to go back and look at stats and find how many times Melbourne have lost by just a single try or less at home, less than 6 points at home. It wouldn't be many.
Yeah, that having been said, though, John, it doesn't look like the Melbourne of old at the moment. It doesn't look like the Melbourne of the big three. With no Cameron Smith there, you really notice the difference. They're not the same team since he's retired. I think they're very lucky to be in the last four here, John.
Well, I think compared to the rest of the teams that were there, I think it was pretty much what it was going to be. The only, based on the form, so you had, the Sharks, the Raiders, the Roosters, and the Knights. Which one of those four is more deserving to be there than the Storm in the last round? Like, the last round is the top four.
Yeah. So you're probably right. It's probably more about there being a lack of depth sort of below them than about them.
And the Roosters almost
really
did it.
Setting the world on fire. And I know we hold them to such high standards because they're the Melbourne Storm and they've been, well, one of, if not the most consistent team of the last 15 to 20 years. So we do hold them to higher standards, we do. But as I've said to you, and I know we've got preview shows to come and everything, John, but it doesn't look good next week. John, I'd be surprised if they get within 20 points of Penrith.
I still don't think anybody is going to be Panthers or the Broncos.
No, and we will get to that. Obviously,
we need to
we do have a preview show later in the week where we can go into that in more detail. But
there's still news articles out about Jerome Hughes probably won't be playing again, but who knows until Thursday. So we'll get onto that on Thursday. But in the end, the Storm managed to get that 18-13 win. If anyone picked the score, they would have won $1 million.
I've just got a few little stats here for you, John. Yeah, Terrell May, he was good for your Roosters. I call them your Roosters because they're your.
Not anymore.
I'm sorry that they're...
Now I'm a Warriors fan all the way.
Yeah. We're on a unity ticket on that one, John. Yeah, he had a game-high 45 tackles, ran for 129 metres, made 7 tackle breaks. So that's now this will be Melbourne's 8th preliminary final in the last 9 seasons. That's incredible consistency. The Storm have now won 8 of their last 9 against the Roosters as well.
Yep. Roosters suck. Warriors all the way up the wires.
Yeah. So I'm with you, mate. I'm with you.
We can go to that next game, the Warriors Knights. That was played on Saturday. Again, it was on at the same time as it was before the AFL this time.
It was, yeah.
So we had some confusion last week about the time zones, and there's a great snippet on our TikTok and Instagram and stuff where you can see how stupid I am when it comes to geography and time zones, and I mentioned that we're ahead of New Zealand, the one country in the world that's ahead of us. So that game was... could
I just mention, I was racking my brain wondering why that game started at 4 o'clock Sydney time. And then I realised, John, it came to me, it was like a light bulb moment because Channel 9 had to get to their news at 6 o'clock.
Absolutely.
Of course. Why else would it be on at 4 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon?
And they needed to time it for the Warriors fans. Otherwise, it would, if it had been on at 6 p.m.
That's the thing. So Channel 9 would have looked at it and gone, well, so it's... Sorry, was it? Now I'm getting myself in knots. I think they're 2 hours ahead.
Yeah, I checked it. We had some queries on TikTok and stuff about it. So
they're 2 hours ahead, right? So Channel 9, their news is important to them. So they would have looked at it and gone, well, we can't kick it off at 7 o'clock New Zealand time or 8 o'clock New Zealand time because that's going to eat right into our news. So we need to do it before. So we'll do 6 o'clock New Zealand time. It'll be 4 o'clock Sydney time.
And actually, the Knights ended up coming crashing down to earth, which you talked about last week in the post-game and the pre-game preview show. The Knights not looking as good as we had thought they were. Yeah. And the Warriors did put on a masterclass. Now, Sean Johnson came back and showed why the Warriors Sean Johnson is so pivotal to the Warriors. He played, I think, 72 minutes.
It came off with 6 minutes to go. And Coach Andrew Webster gave him that early mark there. Well deserved, as you said, John.
Yeah, they were up 40, by 30 points.
Yeah, I mean, it was the smart thing to do. It was a no-brainer, right? You're not going to leave him out there and risk him getting injured when he doesn't need to be out there. If anything, they probably could have taken him off a bit earlier.
Yeah. I thought Chance Nickel-Klokstad was really good as well.
Yeah, had a great game. Ran for 308 metres and had 8 tackle breaks.
Yeah, he was just carving them up all over the park. Now, they're going to play the Broncos. I think a major contributor to them was the crowd as well. The crowd was amazing. I obviously only saw it on television. But the crowd was amazing. They're welcome to the Warriors coming in. The Sean Johnson cheers every time he touched the ball. It definitely is something scary for teams to go over there and experience that.
Yeah, and I mean the Warriors finished 15th last year, John. So this is an incredible turnaround. Full credit to them. I think Newcastle's problem in the end, John, and it was a problem in both finals games. They were just too hot and cold. They just came and went from the game. They were down 16-0 after just 13 minutes against the Warriors. And then they came good for a while until early in the second half. They got it back to 16-10. But then they just disappeared and conceded 4 second-half tries, John. That sort of inconsistency within games, you're not going to get very far in the finals with that. And I think we noticed the difference in class between their finals opponents. The Warriors had 56% possession against them and won by 30.
Yep.
Canberra couldn't beat them with 57% possession.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The Warriors we talked about that. The Warriors were a more consistent team all year, and they were simply going to be a better team against the Knights. With obviously the Raiders fading late, and we talked about them at length last week.
I think the Warriors just had too much intensity in defence for Newcastle. So Warriors just 80 minutes away from their first grand final appearance since 2011, John.
Is that how long ago? Oh my God, that was so long ago.
Yeah, a few more stats for you on that one, John. Yeah, the Warriors had 19 tackle breaks in the first half compared to just 8 by Newcastle. Skipper Tohu Harris ran for 216 metres, had 39 tackles. Dallin Watene-Zelezniak now has 9 tries in his last 7 games at Go Media Stadium. Newcastle really struggled up front. Jacob Safidi ran for 156 metres, and he was the only Knights forward to run for more than 100 metres. And the Warriors have now won their last 5 games in Auckland, John. But like you said, it's going to be a different story when they go to Brisbane next week.
And I think one of the Safidi brothers was a late withdrawal as well for the Knights, but that wasn't going to make that much of a difference. Of course, Willie Mason immediately jumped on Twitter.
I was going to come to that
straight after the match and said, I love this quote, "There could not be a bigger hole that Tyson Gamble wants to crawl into right now. Pick your battles, boy. You are below average." Harsh, Willie.
I mean, but that's Willie, isn't it? You know, I mean, and the thing is, I know I have a soft spot for Willie, that 04 Clive Churchill medal, but I mean, he didn't mention... I know initially he said the rest of the Newcastle spine was rubbish other than Kalen Ponga. But he didn't mention Tyson Gamble by name. And then Tyson Gamble had to go back. I know some people are criticising Willie for this tweet. But that's Willie, right? Everyone's different. Willie's going to go back at you. If you pick a fight with Willie, he's going to hit you back. That's just what he's like. And Tyson Gamble has to live with that now.
Yeah, Tyson Gamble picked the fight. Like you said, Willie Mason mentioned all of them.
Yeah,
it was a group of...
Now, when you look at it, Tyson Gamble would have just been a lot better off just letting that one go.
I think,
lesson learned, Tyson.
One of the things you need to learn when you're with the internet and you're a sports person or something like that is... Don't pick a fight with people with bigger followings.
Yeah. What I sort of have learned from this one, John, is what about the hypocrisy of some people in the media having a go at Willie Mason for this? These are the same people who complain that, these personalities are not outspoken enough. Oh, everyone's boring. All of a sudden, Willie gives them what they want and they bag him for that as well. No, Willie's great. Willie is a sensational media performer, and we should see a lot more of him than what we do.
Well, this is one of the things you always hear, a very common thing for rugby league, is you need characters in the game. Willie Mason's a character,
this is what the media want, and then they bag him for it. No, don't bag him for it. Encourage it. It's great theatre, like we said on our last podcast.
I love it. I really love it. And Tyson Gamble, pick your battles, boy.
Very true.
So, that was the two games. Now, the
Week 3,
Panthers will play the Storm on Friday.
Yeah, that's at the Olympic Stadium.
Yep.
7:50
p.m. That's Australian Eastern Standard Time.
Yep.
And Broncos Warriors Saturday at 7:50 p.m.
That's right. Yeah. Two big games, and we'll go into them in a lot more detail on Thursday.
Definitely after teams are named. As I said, I don't see either of those teams beating Panthers or Broncos. Obviously, the better match is going to be the Broncos Warriors.
Yeah, I think, and again, I don't want to go too far into it because we do have a preview show for this. I think the fact that the Warriors put 40 on the Knights, compared with looking at Melbourne, who only managed 18 against a team like the Roosters, I think of the two games, the Warriors are more likely to cause an upset.
Yeah.
But I am with you. I don't see them winning. Like I say, though, we'll keep our powder dry on that one, and we'll go into it on Thursday.
Ivan Cleary took the Warriors to a grand final, right?
That was the last one they made in 2011. Oh, no.
No, it was the Roosters.
No, sorry. It was the Roosters one in 2002.
Imagine it's Panthers-Warriors grand final and Ivan Cleary beats the Warriors.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it might have... And again, there's just so many things to remember here, John, but Cleary may have been the coach in 2011 as well when they made that grand final. But we'll have to look it up for Thursday. We'll look it up.
It'll be great. So now we can break down the Roosters and Knights year because we've got two more teams.
Yes.
So we'll start with the Roosters.
Yeah.
I don't think this is anything less than a failure for them. They were meant to finish top 4.
I agree.
Obviously, Trent Robinson's got a lot of work to do in the off-season. Just walk through some gains and losses.
Yeah.
So they're gaining Spencer Laniu.
Yeah, that's a very good purchase, John. He's one of the most damaging young ball runners in the game.
Lewis Murphy from Wakefield Trinity. I'm not really sure about that guy because he's from the
I think, but we don't know much about him. Obviously, the other one of note is Dom Young, John.
That's a massive get.
And huge, absolutely huge that they got him in February and that they're not signing him now.
Yeah.
Imagine how much they'd be paying for him if they signed him up now. I bet you Dom Young spewing that he didn't hold out, John.
So that's their Suali'i replacement. So he's obviously just going to be a specialist winger, and you got to think Tupou on one side and Dom Young on the other is probably the most lethal wing combination.
Yeah, well, he scored 25 tries for the season, Dom Young. Scored 23 in the regular season, so he was only one behind Jermaine Osako of the Dolphins on that top try scorers list. Phenomenal season from him. The Roosters are very fortunate to have him, as I said. But you got to hand it to him. I mean, they signed him in February when he wouldn't have been worth anywhere near as much.
Yeah,
that's very
great
smart.
Get for
but
them.
That's very smart salary cap management. You got to give him credit for that.
So they are losing Fletcher Baker to the Broncos. Tukuha Tapuha. Sorry.
Yes. That's all right.
Cronulla Sharks. Matt Lodge has gone nowhere. And Jackson Paulo has gone to the Manly Sea Eagles. And they've re-signed Egan Butcher, Tyler Moriarty, Victor Radley, not Joseph Suaalii. That's weird. James Tedesco, Daniel Tupou, JWH, and Sam Walker. I think Sam Walker's going to have to be their key next year. I think really he's going to have to be the one that steps up, takes control of the game, and on the back of with Dom Young and Daniel Tupu on the edges, that's going to be their key to next year. This year, I just think the fact that they didn't have a set halfback really hurt them the entire year.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to say about the Roosters as well, John, is can I just quote you with what Trent Robinson said about this Ashley Klein decision? So this is a direct quote. He says he was talking about, and he's right, he was talking about the Harry Grant missed knock-on that led to that Melbourne try. And Trent Robinson says, it was pretty clear that it was dropped. He was right there, it hit the ground, what can you do? And then Robinson goes on to say it was an error, and then they went down the other end and scored. But we should have also stopped that. Credit to him for acknowledging that. But that would have been a try-scoring opportunity to us 10 metres out from the line. And in a finals game, they're always critical. He is very measured, Trent Robinson, and I like that about him. But, John, this was a team that were coming 14th after 20 rounds. And then they only scraped into the 8 because they won 5 games in a row against non-top 8 teams. I'm sorry, John, if you're coming 14th after 20 rounds, you can't be blaming one refereeing decision in a finals game for being knocked out of the competition. They had a lot of other opportunities to have a better season, John. This is not acceptable from a star-studded roster like that.
Yeah, well, the season as a whole, you'd have to say, is a failure no matter what he says. This is actually a really common thing in combat sports. So Trent Robinson is like the master kind of manipulator, I think. I love him so much. He's like a great coach. But after combat sport losses, when people lose, they'll often say, I'm not going to make an excuse, but here is a whole bunch of excuses. A massive list.
And look, I read out the full quote there. There's no taking out of context.
So he's like, I'm not going to make excuses. We should have held him out. But, once you say, what's the saying is, but actually means forget everything I just said.
Yeah. It's like he uses that to sort of qualify it, to sort of escape.
It's really like a masterful deflection of actual like what you're truly trying to say. Look, we've talked about it many, many times, and I'm a massive like anti-nonsense what if different things where it takes away try scoring opportunity. They had a try scoring opportunity 6 minutes before that, and then chose to take a field goal. You can't put it down to anything, I think, other than that specific loss. Anything other than poor judgment on the Roosters and poor defence. Has nothing to do with the ref's error.
Yeah.
They should have just defended.
It's one refereeing mistake in one game. Your whole season doesn't come crashing down because of that. John, you touched on it before, John. They've got James Tedesco, Luke Keary, Sam Walker, Brandon Smith, Victor Radley, Angus Crichton, and I know they were missing at the end of the season, but also JWH, Joey Manu, Joseph Suwali. This team shouldn't be not making the last 4, John. There's no excuses.
Yeah.
And also, they have such an advantage over other clubs. They sign pretty much, and I know there are some exceptions like Nathan Cleary and Cameron Munster, but pretty much if they want someone, they get them. They're signing Dom Young. He's the best young winger in the game. Scored 25 tries this year. Leniu, he's such a damaging ball runner. I saw him score a try this year where just from close range, he literally just ploughed through the defensive line. That they are based in a nice part of Sydney, in Bondi. Everybody wants to live in Bondi. Of all the Sydney-based NRL clubs, that's the best area to live. Further to that, they have business connections at that club where players know if they go there, they're going to be looked after football. These are huge advantages they have that other clubs don't have. With that roster, this, as you said, John, this is a failed season.
I think anything short of a premiership win would have been a failed season for them. Even if they'd have won this round and gone through to the next league, the fact that they finished, what was it, 6th, 7th?
They finished 7th at the end of the regular season, then won one
They
final.
had such a poor overall year, I think it was. Anything short of a grand final win is really just like, they've just been making up the numbers in the 8. Even if they had to beat the Storm, there's no way they would have beat the Panthers.
Imagine what sort of carve-up that would have been, John. If anything, maybe the Storm have done them a favour that they don't have to face up to that.
But they'll use that as that's exactly what I'm talking about. Trent Robinson's a master at it. He'll use that as the example of, why we were successful, even though we didn't have the best year. we made the 8. We got to the second round. We won.
It's like what we were talking about with Canberra last week.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the year is a complete and overall utter failure. If the Roosters finish anything less than top 4, then it's a failure unless they win the premiership. Based on their squad, their location, the team, the demands on the
huge success. Advantages they have over other clubs.
The coach is one of the super coaches, current modern era super coaches. They obviously have better facilities. Their stadium is better.
And every year they recruit better. Every year you look at the players on the open market. They get the best players on the open market every year.
Yeah, their losses versus their gains are always their gains. They're in a massive gain.
Dom Young and Spencer Leniu, they add that to the roster they've already got there. Like, seriously,
the other thing they've got over the other teams right now, which is super surprising to me, is they were in that top 5 membership thing. So they could good crowd numbers, good support from their fans, and still only scraped into the 8 with like a lucky draw, if anything. You know, if they hadn't have had to play basically the worst 5 teams in the last 5 rounds. They wouldn't have beat the 5 teams.
If I was in that press conference, John, asking questions, and Trent Robinson had talked about this Ashley Klein refereeing decision, first thing I would have said to him is, what about the fact that you were coming 14th after 20 rounds, Trent? Maybe that's got something to do with why you're not in the competition anymore, not one decision by Ashley Klein.
If they had been a quality team all year, they wouldn't have let that last minute try in. And that comes down to their team. So that's like, we can keep hammering the Roosters.
Yeah.
Now that
I know they're one of your teams, John.
No, not anymore. They suck now.
Yeah, okay.
They're back to being the Roosters.
I know they're an easy target. I know they're a punching bag because they're the glamour club in Sydney. I get all that, but I don't think there's anything we've said that's unfair.
No, it's exactly it. So they're back to being the Roosters. Poosters suck. But the Knights, on the other hand, so we did talk a lot about it last week with the Adam O'Brien turnaround. They ended up finishing 6th?
5th. Yeah, they finished 5th.
So they finished well. So their gains and losses, final for the year is Jed Cartwright from the Rabbitohs, Jack Cogger. No, so they're going Jack Cogger. That's a good get. I don't know what Tyson Gamble's going to do next year with Cogger.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing about Cogger, and it has been said about him, is how's he going to go when he doesn't have that Penrith team around him?
That's true.
And look, we'll see how he goes.
Yeah.
But I think Cogger's been at Newcastle before, I think. He was at the Bulldogs for a while, didn't set the world on fire there, so you wonder how he'll go. I know the Knights are a better team now, but this loss of Dom Young... really worries me for Newcastle. Well, he scored 25 tries this year, John. So where are they going to find the 25 tries next year that Dom Young scored for them this year?
So I think their losses are much bigger than their gains. Because they've lost Lachlan Fitzgibbon and Dom Young, as well as Lachlan Miller and Simi Sasagi. Obviously, they've got Kalen Ponga. And like, the thing with Newcastle is they're not like Manly that we've talked about, where their entire cap is taken up by, 3 or 4 players, and losing one of those players loses everything. But like Newcastle seem to have a pretty well managed cap, but they focus so much of their team around Kalen Ponga. If he does get injured, which he does,
yes,
it's a massive collapse.
And as we know, John, he is susceptible to those concussions, and of course we hope that Kalen Ponga never suffers another concussion and goes through and plays out the rest of his career without any issue. But as you said, he does have these issues, and if you're too reliant on him, it's going to be a problem. Look at Manly, John. Whenever Tom Trebojevic gets injured, Manly just disappear.
Yeah,
and Newcastle are at risk of going down that same path.
So that's one of the things about the top teams like Melbourne and Panthers and things like that, where if one player goes down in that pivotal position, they have another player that can come in and emulate that player. So, Jack Cogger's been doing a really good job at Penrith all year, emulating the players that he has to replace. And Newcastle doesn't seem to have that Kalen Ponga fill-in.
Yeah.
And that does cause them lots of issues.
I guess that's the difficult thing with the salary cap, isn't it, John? I mean, because, a lot of people say, injuries are no excuse. And you go, well, if and to be honest, I'm not sure of the exact salary of Kalen Ponga. I think it's north of $1 million a year.
Yeah, I think he's one of the $1 million players.
Yeah, so that's the issue. People go, oh, well, injuries aren't an excuse. And then you go, yeah, but if I lose $1 million player like Kalen Ponga, I can't replace him with another $1 million player. The salary cap doesn't allow me.
We're not going to have $1 million player sitting aside waiting for Kalen Ponga to go down.
Of course, yeah. But I guess you know what I'm saying in that sometimes it is sort of an excuse in the sense that, well, you don't get the like-for-like money value replacement.
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons why they need to have a more distributed game plan, like that doesn't just rely solely on one player.
Yeah, so then it becomes, well, how do you decide to manage your salary cap? And Manly and Newcastle are two clubs who are going in with this high-risk strategy of putting a lot of money into not many players and just hoping that those players do it for them and don't get injured. I mean, it's a high-risk strategy. At least they have a strategy, John, unlike some other clubs, which I won't name. Yeah.
I know the ones you're talking about. But, yeah, look, I think they'll do better next year if they learn from this year. And as we talked about last week, I think Adam O'Brien's contract should entirely depend on the first 8 rounds of next year.
Yeah, I think I've thought about what you said. I think I'm going to meet you halfway. I think they should give him a 1-year extension, not 2. Yeah. I'd give him 2025, but not 2026 at this stage. I wouldn't be signing him up for those 2 extra years. The loss of Dom Young really worries me.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you said, a lot hinges on the fitness and well-being of Kalen Ponga.
And so they have Jackson Hastings there, right? Yep, still there. Jackson Hastings still there next year. They haven't lost him, yep. So they'll have Jackson Hastings. If he's fit as well, that does a lot for them, I think, in that they'll have that second player that can... Go away. That can do... not enough for the team, but hopefully get them over the line if they lose Kalen Ponga. But yeah, Dom Young is a big loss. I don't know who their winger is going to be next year. I think Lachlan Fitzgibbon is actually a big loss as well. And we really have to see what happens. And especially because of the beginning of this year. You know, like that. It was just a fluke. You look at it was like a fluke that they even made the finals.
Like you mentioned, John, they were 14th after 17 rounds. In round 18, they beat the Bulldogs 66-0, and that just sparked something in them, John. They won 10 in a row right up until that loss to the Warriors on Saturday.
Was it 11 in a row? Oh, no, it was 10 in a row.
It was 10, yeah.
Yeah. And then, we'll just quickly have a look at the teams they beat in that 10 in a row. What are they called? The 9th.
Yeah, it's just...
I'm blind. Okay, so... they beat the Raiders, which doesn't count, the Dragons, which doesn't count, the Sharks, which, I don't know, kind of counts.
The Rabbitohs fell away.
Rabbitohs doesn't count. Bulldogs doesn't count. No. Dolphins doesn't count. Raiders doesn't count. They beat the Storm. Tigers doesn't count. So maybe they were just a...
Yeah, and they beat the Bulldogs twice in that run. Yeah, one of the bottom 3
Maybe
teams.
It is just a matter of luck of the draw. Prior to that, they
they were 14th after 17 rounds.
Yeah,
so
they lost to the Warriors in the opening round. They beat the Tigers. They lost to the Dolphins in round 3. They had that draw with the Seagulls, but they did beat the Warriors in round 6. I don't know. We'll see what happens with them. It is kind of weird to call. The thing is, they got beat by a lot of bottom 8 teams in those opening 2/3 of the season.
Yeah. And so, I mean, O'Brien hasn't put pen to paper on that extension yet, so maybe they will... I'm not saying they'll pull the offer, but they might, take 1 year off it and just give him 2025 and not 2026. We'll see what happens with that anyway. I like your thinking on that, though, John. I'd be very wary of extending him until the end of 2026. We've looked at the teams they beat there. There wasn't a lot to really crow about there, was there?
Yeah, that's one of the issues with rugby league. The length of the season is only 1 week for everybody in it. Where they'll look at it, and just do he was really good last week. But what you've really got to do is look at the entire year.
Yeah, and I know I could go on all day about this, John, but the draw isn't fair in the NRL either. You play some teams twice, other teams once. until you get some consistency in the draw, you know, you should be playing every... I know it's hard now that we've got 17 teams.
It'll be 18 in 2020.
Yeah, so playing everyone twice is not an option with that many teams. So, yeah, it's just one of those things, isn't it? You can get anomalies in the draw where you go 10 weeks with a great run like that.
I don't really like... The thing I hate most about the NRL draw, which I think we'll get into when when it actually comes out in November, is the fact that you can play the same team twice in a few weeks. Like, that's the dumbest thing ever. You know, what was the Cowboys and the Tigers had that, you know... Tigers massively smashed them, and then only like 3 weeks later they played them again.
Yeah, I mean the ideal scenario, John, and I know it's not going to happen, but the ideal scenario is to have 14 teams. You play everybody twice, home and away. You have 26 rounds. It's not going to happen. We've got 17. They're not going to cut 3 teams.
No, they're going to add more. So
yeah, they're going to add more. So well, you almost go if you got 18. If they add an 18th team, then you just go just pull it back to 17 rounds and play everybody once, you know.
As the TV deal comes in.
Yeah. Well, again, that's not going to happen. There's TV, cash to be made, John.
Yeah, so, you know, we'll see what happens with the Knights is really a see what happens, wait and see kind of thing. But in other NRL news, so there is I think the Australian government has indicated that they'd be willing to chip in to expand the NRL to include a Pacifica team, which would be awesome.
Yeah, that would be great.
So it'd be, you know, Fiji, PNG, stuff like that. Obviously located in Australia until they have good enough quality stadiums to host regular season matches and even finals matches.
That's great. That's great news, John. That's what we want to hear. We don't want to hear about plans to put another team in Perth or Adelaide. Let's go somewhere where they love rugby league, where the game's growing.
Yeah, the PNG Hunters are a massive success story.
Yeah, 100%.
Queensland League.
I think we're in agreement on that one, John. That's a good move.
One of the other things that's going on right now, which I'm loving, is Phil Gould has come out and indicated that he believes rugby league players get too much leave. So it breaks down in a kind of a weird way where if you've done 4 pre-seasons or more, you get 10 weeks of leave per year. If you've done 3 or less, you get 8. Man, I want 10 weeks of leave.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it, John? I think Phil Gould is right on this one. The average salary for an NRL top 30 squad player is $380,000 a year. There are a number of players who earn over $1 million a year. In what world do you earn over $1 million a year and get 10 weeks off every year?
Yeah, and that's kind of the life of, like in real work. No, I'm not saying that playing sport isn't real work, but in like workplace, the more you earn, the higher you are, you're less likely you are to take time off.
Yeah,
because you have so many responsibilities. That's one of the things about across all sports. Players earn the most money but have the least amount of responsibility, so can take more time off. His main gripe with it is because it was World Cup last year, right?
Yeah,
it was World Cup last year. So they actually had players coming back from their 10 weeks off in like February, and I've mentioned before I do some sports coaching and I deal with a lot of high-end athletes, world-class athletes and stuff like that. One of the things you have to do to prevent injuries is train. You have to do strength and conditioning. You have to do proper recovery. And when they're coming back that late in a preseason, it doesn't give them enough chance to prepare their body after 10 weeks off. Yeah. And so he believes, until they do a scientific study into it, he believes it is actually a causer of more injuries, the longer leave. Now, I don't know, I don't have any solution. Of course, all of the players are saying, well, he's crazy. But if you try to take away anyone's leave, they're going to say, you're crazy.
Yeah, I think the players have too much power on this one, John. I think they need to be told where to go sometimes. And, John, if you're in an office job, if you're in a position where you're on like $200,000 a year in an office job, you're not just working like all day, every day, Monday to Friday. You're catching up on the weekends. You're getting very little time off. You rarely ever see your family on a salary like that. And these guys are getting an average salary of $380,000. Some, as I said, over $1 million a year. and they want 10 weeks off a year. Like come on. These guys need a dose of the real world. As I said, go get a job on 60 or 70 grand a year where they say, oh, it's Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. They keep you in the office till 7 o'clock. And you just barely make ends meet on that sort of salary living in a city like Sydney. Go see how you like that if you don't like being a football player. These players have got too much power, John.
Yeah, I think the Rugby League Players Association has taken a lot of power and put it in the hands of the players. And I see it in other sports as well, they're always talking about percentage of revenue for their salaries. And of course it's different for every sport and things like that. And you've got to take into account television deals and, they have the thing with the women's NBA versus the NBA where it always comes down to a money value, right? So they'll complain with the women's NBA aren't getting paid a dollar value as much as the men. Of course, some of those LeBron James have $100 million deals and things like that. And then the women's NBA have $200,000 deals. And then in other sports, like rugby league and things like that, they'll again, chase just a different statistic. They'll complain about the percentage they're earning of the revenue. Because again, they're trying to... So every sport has this... we are the market, we are the commodity, we are what you're selling. Yes, we need the players to play the game. But things like extended leave, it turns people away from liking the players if they complain about it. And that whole thing earlier in the year about blacking out the NRL logo and stuff like that, that stuff wasn't good for the game either. I think the players need to really just, as you say, understand where they are in the hierarchy of work. And just wake up to themselves.
They just don't have a dose of the real world. They've come straight out of school into a professional NRL career. So they just haven't had that real world experience, John. If they'd gone away and done a real, and I say a real job, probably shouldn't say it like that because it is...
You've got to say it.
It's a tough job, I get it. Yeah. It's tough being a professional football player. You get beaten up and everything. But I guess another job in the real world, if they were to do that for 1 or 2 years, I think they would appreciate the position they're in a lot more. They just don't have that perspective because they haven't lived it, they haven't experienced it.
Nothing's going to change. No matter what Phil Gould says, they're not going to get less leave. They'll never ever get less leave. But if you think about it, this year we're going to have every week, I should really look up what it's called, the Pacific Cup or whatever it is. A bunch of players are going to play into November. And then they're going to have their 10 weeks off, which is December, January, and half of February. Season starts in March. You're going to have at least 25 players in the squad or 20 players in the squad, whatever it is, plus the New Zealanders, the Tongan, Samoan, whatever teams are in it, which we'll talk about more after the grand final. I'll be more informed after the grand final. But that's a lot of players that are going to be having their 8 to 10 weeks holiday starting again really late.
Yeah, it's a case of it's really hard to keep everybody happy, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, then you have things like the teams that are off now. Are those teams, the guys who didn't make the finals, are they on holiday now? Or are some of the coaches keeping them in training until the end of the season and stuff like that? Look, if I was a rugby league coach, I wouldn't care if you got knocked out and then didn't play finals. You'd be training up until grand final day, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, if under these, I don't know what you call them guidelines or whatever, this 10-week thing they're going on about.
It's their collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah, the CBA. Yeah, sorry, I should brush up on my terminology on these things, John. I mean, you would if you were coaching a team that didn't make the 8. You'd be giving them as much time off as possible now because you want to get it out of the way so you can get them back to training as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's the two options, right? You let them go now and have your 10 weeks holiday, boys, and come back early. Or you make them train up until the grand final like it's a proper season and they go and be the top squads.
And I haven't seen anything about it, so I'm not sure if it's happening at the moment, but often what they'll do is when teams are knocked out of the competition, like teams that don't make the 8, and once they get knocked out, they go into a Kangaroos train-on squad.
Yeah, there is a train-on squad.
So there is, there is, yeah. Okay, so, that's another issue, isn't it? Because the players who are in the train-on squad, they can argue that, we haven't had our time off now, and then, as you said, they'll need to do it later, and it'll eat into their pre-season.
It does count, and so you have things like that, right? So you have some in the train-on squad now doing the Prime Minister's 13. And then, there's Fijian it's Premier's 13 against PNG or Fiji, whichever one it is. There are players in the NRL that will play for that island nation. And so they'll have this like period of time where, they don't have holidays. Then you have things like Grand Final will finish October the 2nd, and the Pacific Cup Championship thing will start in November. Those players will go straight from Grand Final into Kangaroos training. Yeah, it's maybe they just need to set everybody's on holiday from end of November when all of the stuff is over, to end of January. That's it. That's your holiday. That's your rugby league holiday. And take it out of the hands of the clubs. Yeah,
that's not a bad idea, actually. There's so much going on in the NRL. I haven't had that much of a chance to look into the test match situation with train-on squads. And we will have plenty of time for that in October going into the
So one
Pacific
thing about
Cup.
that, actually, because, I love my JWH watch. He may be able to serve his suspension in the internationals because he would have been picked for New Zealand.
Well, that's fair enough. Yeah. It's different to the Jack Whiten situation where he'd retired from rep football and then he tried to unretire. So you know what? I actually had an idea on that one which I meant to share with you, John. If you're a player who doesn't really want to play rep football anymore, what you should just do is, rather than announce your rep retirement, you should just, each time there's about to be a rep team pick, just declare yourself as not being available and don't retire, so that way once you are in a Jack Whiten situation where you need to use rep games to serve a suspension, then you can just use it. Because Jack Whiten, by retiring from rep football, he ruled himself out of doing that when he could just each time say, no, I can't play this time.
Well, they had that with the City Country. That was actually, I think they had a big issue with the City Country where I think Matt Cooper was the poster child of... I think the rules were changed, actually, because of it. Where Matt Cooper would rule himself out as unavailable through injury for the Wednesday night game and then be available for the Dragons on Friday.
Yeah.
And then the Dragons physio would sign a document saying, he needs 3 days of physio and then he'll be right. Like that kind of thing. And I think they may have changed the rules where if you declare yourself unavailable and your match is you have a match in the same week, then you can't play. I can't really 100%.
Yeah, I'm sure they'd probably find some sort of way to close that loophole, John. It was just an idea.
No, but I mean, then players and coaches will always find a way to go around the loophole. Anyway.
Yeah.
But I think it's fair. So the way it breaks down for JWH is if the tribunal head determines that New Zealand isn't just doing it to scam them, basically, then he could count his New Zealand games in the his suspension.
Yeah, and fair enough.
And he'll be back in time for opening round.
Yeah, fair enough.
And he was in form all year in the games he played. He was good. He'd probably get picked for New Zealand as a forward leader.
Yeah.
And so I hope it actually all goes well, and then he'll be playing in Vegas.
There you go. Good. Yeah, there's all the more reason to serve his suspension in the internationals, John. Okay, I do have a couple of items myself here for you, John. So the Bulldogs have added to this recruitment drive of theirs. They're about to announce the signings of Newcastle's Kurt Mann and the Roosters' Drew Hutchison, John, both utility players. They were just waiting for those players to complete their finals campaigns. Now that those teams are out, we should get confirmation
Didn't Kurt
of those
Mann used
signings.
to play for Newcastle? I know he's from Newcastle now. Yeah, he's gone to the Bulldogs. He was at the Dragons for a while too.
Yeah, so we should get confirmation of these signings any moment now, John. So that continues this very utility-focused recruitment drive. So they've already signed Stephen Crichton, as we've talked about many times, Blake Taff, Jamin Salmon and Bronson Cherry for next season. So Crichton, Taff and Salmon are all utilities. So Hutchison and Mann would just add to the very utility flavour to this. Yeah, so Phil Gould's obviously just decided I'm going to sign a bunch of utilities and
I remember
see what happens.
A few years ago he did say something along the lines on the footy show as if you give him 17 Ben Hornbys, he'll win you 20 competitions. Maybe that's what he's doing, looking for 17 Ben Hornbys.
Yeah, I mean, at least he's got a plan. Yeah. We'll see if it works. If it doesn't, I think he's going to be in some trouble. But
we'll see what happens,
Yeah, so that's that, John. A bit more recruitment for the Bulldogs. We'll see where that lands. I am still on the Bulldogs here, John. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take you back in time to the year 2002. So you'll know where I'm going with this.
That's when they cheated.
Yeah. You'll know where I'm going with this once I explain the whole thing to you. So, as you said, they cheated. They were on top of the competition ladder. We talk about Newcastle winning 10 in a row, John. Well, the Bulldogs won 17 in a row that year. They were by far and away the best team. In the minds of most pundits, they were on their way to winning a premiership that year. All of a sudden, they get caught cheating the cap. They're stripped of 37 competition points. They go to last spot on the ladder. The Roosters win the premiership in their absence that year. Now, the reason that I'm bringing this up now is that Braith and Astor, who was at the Bulldogs at that time, of course, went on James Graham's podcast and said the following. We would have, in reference to that 2002 situation, he said, we would have been very hard to beat, but as if they, meaning the Roosters, weren't cheating the salary cap. Please. That's an Astor. That's a quote from that podcast. Now, there's a lot to unpack there, John. He's effectively calling into question the integrity of the Roosters club as a whole at that time.
Everybody does that all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I know, but to actually say, he actually said they, as if they weren't. She used the word cheating. Of course, John, we're not going to pretend that you don't hear stories or have suspicions, John. But, in this specific situation, I haven't heard any stories or anything like that of the Roosters having cheated the cap that year. I mean, he's a player agent and a TV host. I don't think he can really be coming out and saying something like that.
Look,
publicly.
Brian Waldron famously, before the Melbourne thing, was on the Footy Show in a forum and said the NRL should provide a dispensation where if any club comes out and says we were cheating the salary cap, they'll cop no penalties. It's really funny because he was the mastermind behind the Melbourne cap cheating, right? And he admitted on television. It came out afterwards. Everyone paid a lot of attention. He basically admitted on television that Melbourne were cheating and everybody was. Okay, and so one of the things about rugby league and sports in general is a lot of the people work across multiple clubs. They move between clubs in the back office as well. They'll move. So the assumption is that when, somebody from Melbourne, so Melbourne hires a guy who used to work at, say, the Bulldogs, and that guy comes in and goes, here, we got some ways to cheat the cap, let's cheat the cap. Of course, the Melbourne management are going to go, so Bulldogs must be cheating, right? Now, you can't definitively say, Braith and Astor cannot definitively say that the Roosters are cheating the cap, were cheating the cap, or have ever cheated the cap, except in the times they've been fined, because they have been fined. But when you look at it as a whole, the only way the NRL has ever uncovered salary cap cheating at a massive level was from a whistleblower. And then every single person that is inside rugby league basically constantly says everyone is cheating the cap. It just comes down to whether they're cheating it as $1 million or they're cheating it as $70,000. You'll never ever know.
That's the thing. The Bulldogs did cheat it by a lot that year.
So did Parramatta in their famous one, biggest, worst cheats in the world when they got 2 wooden spoons, even though they were $1 million over the cap.
That's the thing. If you're going to do it, at least win, right?
Exactly. Melbourne definitely did theirs massively, and everybody makes jokes
at least
about.
They won,
yeah. Everybody makes jokes about the Roosters all the time with their salary sombrero.
They do. Look, I understand that, John. I get it. We hear stories about this stuff all the time, but unless you have the hard evidence, it's a really...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Everybody will always say that everyone is... And then you have stories like, the Broncos, because the way it works, which is really confusing and no one can actually definitively say how it works, is if you are getting paid to play specifically for that club by a third party, it counts as salary cap, right? Which is a weird statement in itself. So they had the issues with Greg Inglis when he went to the Rabbitohs, in which every single one of his third-party sponsors, for the first time ever, had to sign a statutory declaration saying they weren't paying Greg Inglis to play for the Rabbitohs, but they were paying Greg Inglis as third-party sponsors. And some of his sponsors were like, I don't know the exact names or whatever, but like Redfern Holden. And then there's stories that come out
Alarm
of the Broncos.
bells, ring, ring.
They have stories out of the Broncos where they have the Thoroughbreds Club, which is a group of businessmen that when the Broncos, I don't know if it's still there, but they used to talk about it. A group of businessmen is which when a player signs for the Broncos, the manager is given this list of like 20 dudes that you can go to find third-party sponsors. Now, none of those people are being paid to play anywhere but the Broncos. So, you know, salary cap rorting is it comes down to how weird the salary cap is. And so Braithen Astor can say the Roosters are cheating the salary cap all he wants. Unless he has hard evidence. All the Roosters are most likely doing, it's actually more likely, they are doing what every other club is doing within the confines of the salary cap interpretations. Some of them have 2 sets of books.
Yeah, and it's all the more astonishing considering that Anasta went on to join the Roosters in 2006 and actually played the majority of his career there. So
maybe he got brown paper bags and he doesn't want to admit he was one of the ones that were cheating. Because did he win a premiership there?
At the Roosters?
Yeah.
No. He won one at the Bulldogs, not at the Roosters.
Yeah.
He left the Roosters at the end of 2012 and then they won the premiership in 2013.
Todd Carney and Mitchell.
Sonny Bill, Michael Jennings, James Maloney, yeah.
Yeah, that was it, yeah. Didn't Todd Carney win one with them there?
I
know they lost in 2010 with Todd Carney.
Yeah, that's right. I think Carney won the Dally M that year. Yeah,
might have been. Yeah.
So there you go, John. I in terms of that, at that time I was only 14 years old, and you can imagine my reaction when my team was about to win the premiership and just had it, just ripped away from them. It was like having your heart ripped out of your chest.
Yeah. Well, I would say at that time especially, it was probably more likely that everyone was doing a Bulldogs.
Because it was the first time it happened, right?
In the more modern game, it's probably less likely that people are doing a Melbourne,
Because they know that while it's hard to catch salary cap cheats, once you get caught, you're in all sorts of strife.
What happened to Melbourne is like that. Can you imagine the Roosters were caught now and lost like their 2 in a row, their 2013, whatever it is, If Penrith were caught now, they'd lose so much.
Yeah.
And, Melbourne had to return money and, guys who were involved, Brian Waldron has disappeared from the public eye completely. I just don't think that, in 2002, it's much more likely that everyone was doing the Bulldogs.
Yeah.
But Bulldogs were just stupid enough to get caught. Or whistleblower. That was what it was.
Yeah, I think somebody dobbed them into a newspaper and that was it, right?
Well, that's basically, with Parramatta, it was the same from what I understand. And, if you look at Parramatta, they had that historical nonsense with their board, their CEOs, everything. They had a lot of dodgy stuff going on, just people trying to get elected. And so it was bound to happen that if somebody got sacked or there was a board change or a CEO change or a Leagues Club board change and everyone was ousted, the guys who were ousted would go.
I think Melbourne had 2 sets of books.
Yeah, so they had they were whistleblown as well by somebody who was fired or something along those lines, and it was 2 sets of books.
I mean, at least Melbourne had premierships that could be taken off them. Well, what do they do if there's nothing to take off them?
That was the funny thing about Para.
Yeah, they had. Yeah, you can't strip a wooden spoon from somebody.
What are we going to do here, guys?
You'd like to have a wooden spoon stripped from you.
They started the year with 4 less points or something. Was that them?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
or was that the Warriors?
But I guess I think the Warriors might have been the ones who started with 4 less points.
What are they?
It's a bit hard to remember, but I guess the big difference between the Bulldogs and the Storm was the Bulldogs got caught at the end of the season when they were on top and were about to win it. The Storm got caught at the start of 2010, and then they were told, well, you just can't earn points for the rest of the year. I think that's easier, to be honest, John, than being about to win it and then having it pulled off you, even though Melbourne had those 2 earlier premierships.
I didn't like that because the Dragons won and then everyone used it as they never would have won if Melbourne had been in it. Melbourne were cheating.
Yeah.
Come on, man. But Melbourne would have finished 3rd, I think it was, that year as well. So look, Braithen Astor...
Yeah, Melbourne had a penalty to pay. Yeah.
Yeah, Braithen Astor is, he can say what he wants now. Unless he specifically says, I'm 100% certain and I know that the Roosters were cheating the cap. And then he can get done with slander or whatever it is. He can say whatever the hell he wants. But I just think they shouldn't talk about stuff like that. It takes away from everything and it makes you look like a whiny sore loser.
It does, yeah. It doesn't. he doesn't come out of that looking very good. It's like if you get caught speeding, you can't say to the police officer, look over there, that guy's speeding as well. Yeah. Like you've done the crime, you've got to do the time.
Police will just say, we're talking about you, bro.
Yeah. 14-year-old me went into a rage, John. I couldn't accept it. I was filthy. I was devastated. But 35-year-old me looks at it and goes, they had no choice than to do what they did. Yes. Okay, I've just got
else for the NRL?
one more. I know we've had a big NRL segment today. So, John, the West Tigers, they can't keep out of the news. So, apparently, former assistant coach, David Furner and Robbie Farah were involved in a heated confrontation which led to Furner being terminated as assistant coach. Furner had 12 months to go on his contract but was shown the door. It's understood now the coach, Benji Marshall, wanted to keep him. But, the two wise heads, CEO Justin Pascoe and Chairman Lee Hadjipentelis, overruled him and axed Furner. It's been reported that Furner and Farah almost came to blows during the Tigers' home game against the Warriors in Hamilton in New Zealand. Furner apparently is one of the best fighters around, John, so it was a good thing that Robbie Farah didn't get into a scuffle with him. But this is just, the circus rolls on, right?
Yeah, so apparently, Robbie Farah has been hired there to be the general manager of football or something. I don't know what a general manager of football does. It was something that was invented.
That's Phil Gould's role at the...
It's something that was invented for Phil Gould, for Penrith. And now all of them need one.
Yeah.
But, man, the Tigers... Look, what's Benji Marshall going to do? We've talked about it before. What's Benji Marshall going to do with that? He's lost his assistant coach. Like, Dave Furner is very experienced. He was at Canberra for a long time. By all accounts, he's a great football mind. And now Benji Marshall has what? He can't even keep his assistant coaches. He doesn't have a say. Yeah. And he's their head coach for next year. I'd say another wooden spoon for them in the making. Just from off-field dramas alone.
I'll tell you what, John, didn't Robbie Farah had a hand in Jason Taylor's removal as West Tigers coach when he was playing there?
Mick Potter.
Also had a hand in Mick Potter's acting as a coach. And now, even after he's finished playing, he's having a hand in other staff being axed. I'll tell you what, it's a good thing he won that premiership in 2005, John. He's been living off that one for a while, Robbie Farah.
Yeah, you can't... There's no solution for the Tigers. Unless they scrap the whole... They shouldn't move the club and then scrap everything in it. Scrap the balls.
Yeah. that premiership was 18 years ago. They've been living off that one for a while.
And they've only made the finals 4 times in that 18 years or whatever it is. They're basically the worst performing club in the competition in every regard.
Yeah, I think it is actually. It's only twice they've made the finals since 2000.
Sorry, I overstated it.
I think it was only
even worse.
Only 2010 and 2011 they made the finals. It's just my beef with Farah, John, is if people are going to have power in a club, they need to earn it, right? They need to earn the right, and I don't think that his history at the club earns him the right to be able to just cast off these coaches at will. When, especially, we all know that the coaches are not the problem at the club. They go through so many of them. The problems run a lot deeper.
Well, if the head coach wants to keep an assistant coach and then the general manager of football doesn't, what does that say about the head coach?
I'll tell you what, I don't think Benji Marshall is qualified to be the head coach. I don't think he's ready. But I'll take Benji Marshall's, thoughts on the matter over the CEO and the chairman, John.
And the general manager of football.
The CEO and the chairman, they just don't know what they're doing. I mean, that's a bit of a problem, isn't it?
I just can't see anywhere up for the West Tigers until they can sort out their off-field mess.
Yeah, that was comprehensive
NRL, man, it's the gift that keeps giving. It never stops.
Yeah.
The season's almost over, and I'm sure we're still going to be spending an hour on the NRL every week. The AFL though,
yes.
I love news. There is some negative news in the AFL that we'll get to at the end of.
Yes. Oh wow!
Finally got one. But we'll start with Melbourne Carlton. So yeah, I couldn't watch this because KO was a massive letdown to me. I couldn't log in. It had too many connections. That is a ridiculous thing to have for a technology company, especially a streaming service. So in the end, when I finally got on, I was watching the Storm Roosters and the Carlton-Melbourne game on split screen.
You're not happy with KO? I wouldn't like to be KO answering your phone call when you ring up and complain.
Absolutely appalling. Like, it's well documented on the internet that KO, people don't really think KO does well, but this was footy finals night with two major games, and people couldn't it wasn't just me.
Yeah. It's not the night for KO to be making mistakes.
Too many connections. You've got to put some scalability in your connection. Anyway.
Yeah. Carlton, Melbourne, John, a bit of a review. As we talked about last week, John, Melbourne just no good shooting at goal. They had 26 scoring shots to 18 and still got beaten. Carlton 11-7-73, beating Melbourne 9-17-71. So 9-17. That's just some misfiring up forward, John. Blake Acres kicking the winning goal for Carlton. He kicked 2 for the game. That was a great winning goal.
Beautiful. He kicked that whole sequence was amazing. Yeah. That was... Melbourne were up with like a minute 30. They were going to win, and it was one passage of play. It was just kick mark through the... It was just like...
Yeah.
It was one of those moments where I was going to scream out and my kids play like, yeah! But, yeah, it was like that game went nothing like I thought it would, because Melbourne were up by quite a lot in the first quarter. They were ahead by, I don't know, like 13 or 18 or something, and I thought they would hold that lead for the whole match. But, because I was just only able to check the scores. I wasn't able to watch the match.
Yeah.
But I think that Carlton played much better what I saw, they actually were just much better. As you said, they got their scoring opportunities and they scored. Melbourne, on the other hand, got their scoring opportunities and missed.
Yeah. To be honest, John, I haven't looked at the exact amount of years, but it's been a long, long time since Carlton have been in a preliminary final. I know they last won a premiership in 1995. I think they were knocked out by the Kangaroos in about 1999 in a very close finals game. I'm not, to be honest, John, off the top of my head, I'm not sure if it was a prelim final or not. It may well have been, and that may have been the last time they were in a prelim final. So if it was that year, then that's 24 years ago, but it could have been, we could be going all the way back to 95 when they last won it, and to be talking about their last prelim final.
They've got a hard battle this week.
And we will get to that in our preview show on Thursday.
Yeah, I think Melbourne were just, we'll break them down in a minute, but they just looked like they weren't in the game at all. Even, I guess, I haven't gone back and watched what I missed, but based on the second half, Carlton took over and Melbourne looked like they were never going to win. Even when they got ahead, they didn't look like they were going to win to me. I just thought Carlton was the team that deserved to win. And, they had the crowd shots and stuff like that. It was amazing to see that kind of emotion in the crowd. And the crowd was massive, like 92,000, something like that. And it was great to see, actually. It was really great theatre.
Yeah, I remember hearing, I think it was Carlton's biggest crowd since 1993, I believe.
Wow.
And it was Melbourne's biggest crowd since 1964. So there you go.
It was a great...
Just going off the top of my head, I think I heard that in commentary in the game, John. So.
Well, I really enjoyed the match as well. I really enjoyed it, the second half. I thought it was a really good...
Yeah, great to see two traditional Melbourne rivals going head-to-head at the MCG in a finals game. Doesn't get any better than that. I wish I was there. The atmosphere would have been something special.
Crazy. That's...
Melbourne and Carlton.
GWS. Okay, so
you got your
my GWS.
You're decked out in your Giants gear.
This morning, my daughter told me it looks like DoorDash. She thought I was a DoorDash t-shirt, and now I can't unsee it. And I'm a little bit worried if I walk around, people are going to be asking me where's their food, because it's orange and the GWS logo looks like the DoorDash logo. She's really messed up with my brain now.
Yeah, they might have to get new colours, GWS.
I think so, man. Come on, let's just tweak the logo. So I watched this whole game. I was behind. I didn't watch it live because I was had to get home. And GWS was fire.
It seemed like they controlled the game from start to finish, John.
Yeah, they were just fire. They made Port look like a bottom 8 team, I think. They were ahead by a lot the whole match. There was a couple of times where Port kind of got on a roll, and you thought, okay, they're going to come back. And it wasn't a matter of them failing. It was GWS just clicked into gear and went, no. learn your place, son. Pick your battles, boy.
Yeah.
It was like, and GWS is going to play the Collingwood this week. Again, like a difficult match, but GWS didn't look like a team on the road either. They looked like it was...
Great effort going to Adelaide and winning that game, John. Like you said, GWS, they pretty much had a comfortable lead for the whole game. Jesse Hogan kicked 4 goals for the Giants too. Great game from him. Well done.
It's really, really good. Like, seriously, I'm psyched. I think they can beat the Pies, but it's going to be head and heart.
I hope you're wrong. It's you against me in that game, John.
It's going to be head and heart again, though.
There was one thing just to add a little bit of colour to our show here, John. One thing I noticed at the start of the game, which I really liked, and Port Adelaide had run onto the field, that the whole team were in a huddle. I'm not sure if you saw it. And they played that song by In Excess, Never Tear Us Apart, on the speakers in the ground. The team was huddled together, so it wasn't a running on song. They were already out on the field when it was played. And the fans in the crowd had Never Tear Us Apart on their scarves. Apparently they've been doing that since 2014, Port Adelaide, and they got the idea from Liverpool in the Premier League, You'll Never Walk Alone. Just thought it was a really good thing that they did, and I was thinking, if we're... I'm sorry to go back to NRL, but if we're applying it to our NRL teams, the Bulldogs have Who Let the Dogs Out by the Baha Men. The Baha Men, that great group from the early 2000s, they keep getting royalties from this football club in Sydney. It's probably coming through every second week.
They get 12 cents every 3 months. In the
I was just thinking, John, if the Dragons, or should we say, the Dragons, if they were to have a song, what do you reckon they'd go for?
Puff the Magic Dragon. Something from Imagine Dragons. What is it? So something from Dragons. But I can't imagine them standing around the middle of the in the field in a huddle with Puff the Magic Dragon.
A really good initiative. I loved it. I felt watching that at the start of the game. I felt pumped. I thought, it sort of gave me goosebumps. I thought there should be more of that in Australian sport. Yeah,
definitely. Americans have things like the drum lines and stuff like that, and that's like part of the show. It'd be great. I did see. I didn't know what was going on. I was actually making myself dinner while the game was starting. So now I understand it, and it's awesome. It was like interesting and weird, and I thought perhaps somebody had passed away. So they were doing a minute of silence or something, but that was cool, man. Yeah, GWS through. They're going to play the Pies on Friday.
Yeah, so looking ahead to these week 3 fixtures, John, as you mentioned, Friday at the MCG, 7:50, Collingwood and GWS. Saturday, Brisbane Lions and Carlton at the Gabba, 5:15 p.m. So that sets up a sensational Saturday for the people of Brisbane and those of us in other parts of the country who want to settle in.
Broncos
for us. So the Lions game kicks off at 5:15 p.m. at the Gabba. That should finish just moments before the Broncos game starts at Suncorp at 7:50 p.m, John. So that's
a good Brisbane. If only they could play them both at the same stadium.
Oh, imagine that. Imagine that. That'd be epic, wouldn't it? So that's something to really look forward to there on Saturday, John.
So I think we'll talk about it on Thursday, but this is the same as the NRL. I can't see the Lions or Collingwood losing. It's their matches to lose.
Yeah, it is absolutely. Yep.
So for a year in review for Melbourne, I just think they were a really inconsistent team for the top 8. Actually, they did finish in the top 4.
Yeah.
Which is a good finish, but I just think their consistency during games was a little down. It probably comes down to the fact that they couldn't convert scoring chances the whole year.
Yeah, so like you said, John, they've gone out, they've finished in the top 4, but they've gone out in straight sets in the final, so that's never what you want if you're making the top 4.
Yeah.
I guess what sort of compounds that disappointment is they won 7 of their last 8 games of the regular season. So they'll be disappointed with how their finals campaign went after having that great run into the finals. In that other finals game against Collingwood, they had 18 scoring shots to 15 and still lost as well. So a failure to convert these opportunities in front of goal in the big games really cost them this season. They need to address that, John. They can't keep having all those scoring shots and not converting them. You can't be finishing with more scoring shots than your opposition and getting beaten.
Yeah, definitely. I really think that's what that comes down to. What they can do in the off season to improve that, it's just more practice kicking goals.
Yeah. They're going to have to look at recruitment. They're going to have to look at forwards at other clubs. They're going to have to look at recruitment. Obviously, their group of forwards at the moment are not cutting the mustard, and that they need to recruit some players in who can convert these opportunities. They need to be looking at the list of the top 5 goal kickers for the season, and trying to recruit one of them in.
Yeah. What is your job as a forward in AFL other than to convert the goals, goal scoring opportunities to goals?
Yeah, I mean, someone like Charlie Curnow from Carlton would be great, although your chances of getting him away from Carlton would be Buckley's. Someone like Taylor Walker from Adelaide, they need to be... I'm not saying that these players... I guess that's the other issue, isn't it? The players need to be available, We'd all love to have the best players, but they need to recruit some new players into their forward line, and that's something they've got to think about over the off-season.
Yeah.
In the draft, that's where they need to be looking. Forwards, you might probably look at some young forwards, take a punt on some young forwards, if they're not able to recruit some bigger name forwards from other clubs.
Yeah, that could be the solution. Get some off-the-cuff fun kind of...
Yeah, if you can't get the big names, then you just got to take a punt on younger players and hope that it comes off. But at least they know what their problem is and they need to address it.
Yeah, that's an easy fix. Well, easy.
Yeah, well, it doesn't take Einstein to work out what their problem is.
If you know what your problem... If you only have one problem and you know what that one problem is, then it's easy to work on fixing that problem.
Yeah, at least they know what the problem is, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And so with Port, at the beginning of the year, I didn't think they'd go as well as they did. Ended up winning third. Everyone expected them to beat the Giants, which I guess I would say that's their only failure for the year. Last year they finished 11th, so you can't say anything other than this was a successful year. They improved, they went up, and they just need to work on their quality in the finals in the big matches.
Yeah, like Melbourne, John, so we got the situation in the AFL where 2 top 4 teams have gone out in straight sets. So they finished third, Port Adelaide lost both their finals games. I think where it started to unravel for them was they lost 4 in a row between round 18 and round 21. That's where the wheels started to come off a bit there, John. So they finished to the season not great, and they'll be disappointed going out in straight sets. No team likes to make the top 4 and lose both finals.
Yeah, just big game moments, big game attitude. And like I said, the Giants just really, really hammered them down. Yeah, and
it was like I was saying last week, if you're going to, and it doesn't matter where you finish in the top, well, obviously it's better to finish in the top 4, of course, but if you don't win a finals game, what's the point? What's the point in being there? And then that even goes for top 4 teams who go out in straight sets. You have to win finals games to be taken seriously.
Well, the movement from 11th to 3rd is a massive...
Yeah, there are positives to take out of it. Top 4 finish.
They really need to work on... the same thing. They know their problem. The big game performance is their problem.
Yeah, 100%.
They need to improve. That's a much harder one to fix than the...
It is because obviously you don't get many opportunities in big games. You've got to wait till the end of the season, and you can brain it throughout the regular season, but the test comes in the finals games, and they failed the test this year.
Their improvement for next year is going to come down to whether they can win a finals match.
And that goes for both these clubs that are going out.
Definitely,
they want to be winning finals next year. Yeah. They don't want this to be happening again. I do have a little bit of AFL news, John.
Go for it. It's amazing.
Yeah. So, but I guess this is some very sad news. Obviously, on Saturday with the passing of the great Ron Barassi at the age of 87. Just a phenomenal CV he has in the game, John. He won 6 VFL premierships as a player with Melbourne. He was a 3-time All-Australian as a player. He captained Victoria. He's a Sport Australia Hall of Fame inductee. He was a rover in the AFL Team of the Century. He has legend, and very rightly has legend status in the Australian Football Hall of Fame. And as a coach, he was a 4-time VFL premiership coach. I got very vague memories of him as that Swans coach between 1993 and 1995. He coached Tony Lockett at the Swans in 1995.
That's going back far time.
Yeah, he's going back. Yeah, I had to really rack my brain for that. But yeah, very sad news.
Very sad.
An icon of the game, and unfortunately, passing away at the age of 87. But a great life and a life well lived. And our thoughts are with his family.
Definitely. So they actually, at one of the matches on the weekend in the AFL, they actually had a crowd member pass away.
Yeah, they did. I think it actually. Yeah, I'm not going to say which match it was because I don't know. I'm not going to say that, but yeah, it was at one of the games.
So that can bring me to my AFL news.
Okay.
That's a very sad thing. Which also, at the same match, there was once again another racism allegation from the crowd. This is a common occurrence. It's quite weird because NRL is full of bullfeds. The crowd is full of bullfeds. But the AFL seems to have this happen. It's a lot more prominent in the AFL, and so much so, which leads into the next thing. There are some players, ex-players, who are considering starting a class action against the AFL, stating that the AFL didn't protect them from racism during their careers. Now, the AFL hasn't made a comment on it because papers haven't been served, which is fair enough. But it is like an interesting thing I find about the difference. You always got to compare AFL and NRL in Australia.
Yeah, that's just what we do in Australia.
Like, obviously there are racist things that happen in the NRL, but it just seems so much more common in the AFL. I don't know if it's because it has such a small amount of things happen in the AFL that it's always a much bigger thing, and it's always a big thing. Anyone who does this is an idiot. It's not even a matter of opinion. If you're screaming racial abuse at a player, you're an idiot. If there's racial undertones at your club, people who are doing it are idiots. It's just very weird to me that it happens so much in the AFL. There was a much publicised Adam Goodes situation, and at the time of that, everyone kept saying, "Oh, it's not racist that he's getting booed. The people aren't booing him because they're racist." But the thing was, he felt that it was, and so therefore you got to stop it. Like, that's the way it breaks down. If the person getting attacked feels like there's racial undertones, then you got to stop it.
You do. I guess it's just. When booing becomes a thing, it's very difficult to ask that many people to stop doing it. You ask them to stop, they're not going to stop, John.
No, that's going to make it worse.
Yeah, it's going to make it worse. And I guess you had that grey line of, it's booing. Yeah, it's that. Obviously, there was probably an element of it that was racist. But all of it might not have been. It was that real grey area. But when you've got clear-cut racism, John, there's no place for that. There's no place for that in sport. There's no place for that in society.
Yeah.
That's not acceptable, and it needs to be stamped out in all forms.
I hope the AFL can really educate their fans and players a lot more to prevent it. And
yeah, maybe you ask the question, John, why does it happen more in the AFL than the NRL? Maybe it's because they get much bigger crowds. If you get much bigger crowds of people, you're more likely to have bigots in the crowd.
That's sad because
it's terrible. Yeah.
There's a lot of soccer matches where they've around the world, not in Australia, thank God, where they've had to ban crowds because of a racist hatred for each other, the two different countries and things like that. So you don't want to have that kind of situation. But yeah, so apparently there was a crowd member who was removed at one of the matches at the same match that the person passed away. So from a crowd perspective. So that on the flip side, actually, on the other side of the NRL, which I find happens a lot more in the NRL, there was a moment of silence at the Melbourne Roosters match. And of course, during the moment of silence for passing of, I can't remember who passed, that's terrible. Of course, people in the crowd were yelling out, "Go the Storm, go the Roosters." This happens a lot more in the NRL, and I also think that's really unacceptable.
Yeah, that's clear disrespect.
Yeah, I was at
if somebody passes away, you need to show them the respect of being silent during a moment's silence.
Yeah, at the centenary tests, Australia versus New Zealand, Jack Gibson had unfortunately passed away the day before. So they had a moment of silence, and there was people yelling out during that. And it was it was a moment of levity because then someone really yelled, "Show some effing respect, UCs." It became like a...
Yeah.
But it was still I've never been to an NRL match that the moment of silence was respected.
Yeah, I mean, if that had happened, John, if I was at a game and and somebody was yelling out these stupid things at a moment where you should show some respect to somebody who's passed, you just, and I know it's hard, but you just ignore those people, right?
Yeah.
You do the right thing and you pay your respects yourself, you remain silent. If somebody wants to make an idiot of themselves and make noise during that time, well, that's on them. It reflects really poorly on them. But yeah, I wouldn't be yelling at them. I know this person had the right intentions, and I can understand the anger because, surely you can sit there and pay somebody some respect for a very short amount of time.
Short amount of time.
Yeah, just behave. Show some decency.
Yeah. So there's always negative things that come out in Australian sport, I guess. But that's the AFL. Hopefully, they can help. They can improve a bit. But we can start talking about some cricket.
Yes.
There's some interesting stuff that happened in the Asia Cup. First of all, they did finish the Asia Cup. It did end up being India versus Sri Lanka. But before
you did alert me to this morning, John.
Before that, the match before India played Bangladesh as a final round, and Bangladesh won.
Wow.
So it didn't make a difference in the ladder. So it did end up India finished top of the ladder, followed by Sri Lanka, and so they had their match last night. Now I was checking up on it, and it was rained out at the beginning. There was the fears it was going to be called off. I think it was about an hour of rain.
This was in the Asia Cup final?
Yeah. There was about an hour of rain, and then they did finally get the covers off.
But from what I saw, John, I don't think it impacted on the number of overs, though.
No.
There was a delay, but they were still... Yeah.
The people were still at the crowd was still at the grounds for a very short period of time because Sri Lanka was bowled out in an hour and 20 minutes. 15 overs for 50 runs.
Wow.
That
doesn't fill you with a lot of confidence for Sri Lanka going into the World Cup, does it, John? So there were 5 ducks in that innings for Sri Lanka. Mohammad Siraj took 6 for 21. Hardik Pandya took 3 for 3. And it only took India 6.1 overs to get to the target with the loss of no wickets.
Well, because they would have walked out there and gone, this is now 2020. I only need to score 51 to win.
You mentioned that India-Bangladesh result, John. It sounds like India, well, obviously they didn't need to win that to get into the final. So you'd probably need to look at that and go, well, were India fielding their best team in that game? Probably not.
I think Bangladesh won by 2 wickets. Something like that.
Yeah, so, it's not good signs for Sri Lanka going into the World Cup.
Pakistan, who missed the final, and then you got Sri Lanka, who in the final played like a under-8 park cricket team against India, who's going to be hosting the World Cup.
Yeah.
And in that match, so Mohammad Siraj, who you said, he got 6 for 21 from 7 overs. He got 4 wickets in 1 over.
Wow. Amazing.
It would have been so bad to be at the match as a Sri Lankan.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what are you going to do?
You'd want your money. You'd want most of your money back, wouldn't you? So you've only got, out of a possible 100 overs, you only get 21 overs as a spectator.
But you were there for like an hour while the rain was on.
Yeah.
And then, in the South Africa versus Australia. South Africa's dominated Australia.
They've come back. I don't know if I'll say too much about the 4th game, John. I think we might. The only thing I'd say about Game 4, John, was South Africa won by 164 runs. In that game, John, Adam Zampa got absolutely carded. None for 113 from 10 overs. So that's the equal most runs conceded by a bowler in an ODI, matching fellow Aussie Mick Lewis's record, who also conceded 113 runs also against South Africa way back in 2006. So that's an unwanted record for Adam Zampa in that one job.
And so they got smashed in the 4th test. And then
in the 4th game, and then in Game 5 in Johannesburg. So that was only finished this morning. South Africa made 9 for 315 from the 50 overs. John Aiden Markram, he got amongst the runs again for South Africa, hit 93. And in reply, the Aussies only made 193 in 34.1 overs, John. So that's 3 games in a row where Australia only batted 34 overs. That's a real concern going into the World Cup, John.
Especially because they were dominating in the first 2 tests, and then from the 3rd they just switched off. Warner was in form, hitting centuries. Like, if you go back 2 weeks ago and listen to this podcast, you'll hear us talking up Australia. But now that's like a real concern.
Yeah, like you said, they won the first 2 games of the series, and South Africa have come back to win it 3-2. Mitch Marsh made 71 for the Aussies. He was the only one to get any runs with the bat. Marco Jansen took 5 for 39 for the Proteas. And South Africa won that one by 122 runs. Yeah, so winning that 5-game series, as we said, 3-2, coming back from 2-0 down.
So it's a month to the World Cup kickoff, tip-off, bowl-off.
I think it's October
9th.
Yeah, 8th
so
or 9th.
It's about 3 weeks.
That's right.
About 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I hope Australia's really got to regroup. Their warm-up series has shown they're not going to. If they play like that again, they're not going to be making. Everyone's got to play everyone, so it's 45 matches. It's going to be an interesting World Cup. You got Sri Lanka, who's been dominated, Australia, who's been dominated. South Africa's played themselves into form. India obviously just won the Asia Cup. Interesting World Cup to come. I can't believe Australia lost so badly because they didn't just lose. They got dominated in the last few minutes.
I mean, some key players were missing, of course. So, we'll just sort of be wary of reading too much into that. I know they have another 3-game ODI series against India going into the World Cup, so hopefully they can, tinker with a few things in that series. I'm sure we'll see much closer to their best side fielded in those 3 games. They really need to be using those as a dress rehearsal for the World Cup, and then I believe they've got a couple of World Cup warm-up games going in, so still plenty of cricket to be played before the World Cup. The Aussies need to use it wisely. There's some worrying signs in that ODI series against South Africa.
So, we'll keep up to date on that as we go, because the World Cup's going to be a lot of podcasts. It does go for like 6 weeks.
Yeah, well, that's good for us, John. We've got the Cricket World Cup in October. We've got the finish to the Rugby World Cup in October. And we've got the Pacific Cup in the Rugby League. So ordinarily we'd be a bit worried about filling our show in October, but we're not going to have any concerns like that, John.
A lot of sport coming for the rest of the year. Yeah. So I'll just go over the UFC. Sure. I went and watched Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem on the weekend during the UFC main card. So I was actually in the movie theatre during the main fight. I was in the movie theatre on my phone watching Shevchenko versus Grasso. So it ended up in a draw. Okay, so now Grasso's 1 up on Shevchenko on a draw. With the UFC, there's always a massive argument around scorecards in split or close decisions. And one of the things that I rightly agree with, a lot of the judges in combat sports are not actually fighters. It's a 40-hour course or something like that to become a judge, right?
Not a bad career option.
You get to fly around the world and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's worse jobs than that,
so
for sure.
It became a draw. While I was watching it, to be honest, with no commentary in the movie theatre on my phone, I thought the best possible outcome and the most accurate outcome would be a draw, actually, because it looked so even. And you have a 5-round fight because that way it's not likely to be a draw. The reason it shouldn't have been a draw is because one judge, Mike Bell, gave Alex Grasso a 10-8 round in the last round, but actually Shevchenko clearly won that round. Grasso finished the round on top, but for 3 minutes 45 seconds, Shevchenko was dominating Grasso. So it was a little bit weird, though both of them actually believed that they won. And that's what's really funny. Like, both of them are sore drawers. Sore losers, sore winners, and sore drawers.
I did, and you may disagree with this, John, in your wisdom on the UFC. I did catch a bit of commentary on it. I was flicking the channels, caught a bit of commentary on Shevchenko Grasso. Is it true that Shevchenko, a couple of the commentators were saying that it was... Yes, sorry, I've just lost my train of thought. I'll let you pick up. Sorry.
So it was a split draw as well. So one judge gave it to Grasso, one judge gave it to Shevchenko.
Yeah.
And then the last guy gave it a draw. It means they got to run it back. So Shevchenko's saying that it was a Mexican day, even though it was at the T-Mobile Arena. Okay, so it was a massive Mexican crowd, a lot of Mexican fighters. The Mexican fighters did really, really well. The crowd was amazing. A lot of Viva Mexico chants, stuff like that. Lots of Mexicans stood up and won for their crowd. And Shevchenko's now come out and it's like, it's all just, if this hadn't have been a Mexican crowd, then I would have won. Now, I like Valentina Shevchenko. She's a quality fighter, but she does have a habit of having a little bit, she's a bit of a sore again, not a loser.
Yeah.
She didn't get to retain, like, Grasso gets to retain the belt because it's a draw.
Yeah.
But she's a sore drawer.
Yeah. I've actually just remembered what I was going to say. So the commentators said that Shevchenko, she fought her best fight. The best fight she could have possibly fought. Yeah. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. She had way more top control time.
Yeah.
She was, I believe she threw more significant strikes. I think she threw less strikes, but more significant, like landed more significant. She had a lot of top control time, one submission attempt. And it did come down to that split draw. If it had been a 10-9 round in the last, and Shevchenko would have won. But yeah, that one judge gave it a 10-8, and 10-8's pretty rare. And so it is. They need to run it back and fight again. So one of the things that Shevchenko could use as an example is actually the UFC made a Mexican-style belt for this match. So if it hadn't gone to Shevchenko, it would have been a little bit weird. Because she's like from Kazakhstan or something like that. In the other fights, Holland versus Della Maddalena was a split decision for Della Maddalena. But again, I was watching it no commentary, because I was watching it in the movie theatre.
Yeah.
And I thought Kevin Holland actually won. He was better on his feet. He looked like he was landing better strikes.
Yeah.
It's good that the Aussie won, but, a bit unfair. I thought Holland won. Again, a lot of arguments on the internet from pundits, because anything that's a split decision is going to cause arguments. Beautiful for combat. And the other match that I brought up the other day was Rosas Jr. He absolutely pumped his opponent in the first round. 54-second TKO. Just gone.
Wow.
Just this 18-year-old kid quickly. Is a monster. He's so small, and small fighters don't normally end fights that quick, but he's got really heavy hands. Like, really heavy. And so he knocked his opponent down and just pummeled the crap out of him on the ground. Ref had to call it off. That was pretty much all that happened in the UFC. So there was a lot of good fights on there, like Lupi Godinez was really good, and a lot of the Mexicans are really good, thanks to the pro-Mexican crowd. And it's I think, the UFC announced they're going to build a performance institute in Mexico. And it's great, because there's a lot of great fighters coming out of Mexico. Like, a lot. And so it's going to be a really interesting time for Mexican. At one point, they had three concurrent champions at the same time, unfortunately, Grasso is the only one that kept their belt, but Mexico's looking really good for MMA.
Yeah, awesome.
You want to get into the Rugby Union World Cup?
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, the New Zealand-Namibia match, I just want to start on that, because that was a pretty low-scoring affair.
Only 71-3.
Yeah. No, I was calling it, thinking it was going to be over 150.
Yeah, we thought 150 was a chance of being racked up, John.
It was a pretty low-scoring affair. That ended as expected. On the other hand, Australia-Fiji did not end as expected.
No, it did not. I've got some stats on this Wallabies capitulation for you, John.
So everybody, in the end, Australia lost to Fiji. Yeah,
so Fiji beat the Wallabies 22-15. It's a massive upset, obviously, John. It's the first time since 1954 that Fiji's beaten Australia in a rugby test match. The loss leaves the Wallabies with a 1-1 win-loss record in Pool C. The Wallabies play Wales in Lyon next Monday. That's now a must-win game. It's only the fourth time the Wallabies have lost a World Cup pool match, John. They've never exited the World Cup in the group stage. Skipper Will Skelton was ruled out prior to the game with a calf injury. One small consolation, John, is the Wallabies did secure a bonus point though. So let's see if that helps down the track.
No, they're currently sitting third in their pool.
Yeah, the Wales are on top of the group, undefeated on 10 points. Fiji second, the Wallabies third on 6 points. Both Fiji and the Wallabies on 6 points. So there's the Wales game, then another game against Portugal. They're the last two group games for the Wallabies, John, and they must win.
So they have a thing called MMA math, like this guy beat that guy, therefore that guy could beat that guy, and so on and so forth. Wales beat Fiji, Fiji beat Australia. Does that mean that Wales is going to beat Australia?
Yeah, well, you hope not, John.
So apparently, from what I read, because again, I'm not going to watch it. It was 1:15 in the morning this morning.
Yeah, and we've got things to do today, so we need our sleep.
It was Australia's worst game of Eddie Jones's current stint. So they're not improving.
No, it doesn't look good. But look, I'll give Eddie the benefit of the doubt for now, John. If the Wallabies go out in the group stage, I'm going to have a lot more to say about it. It's not a knockout game. They're not done for yet. So I'm going to keep my gun loaded on that one, John. I'm going to hold off. If they don't make the knockout stage, I'm going to have plenty more to say about it.
They have to win both matches to make the knockout stage. They're currently sitting third. So they need to beat Wales and then they need to beat Portugal. Both matches they should.
Yeah, they could do both. They could make the knockout stage. So this is a catastrophic result for Australian rugby, but they're still there. They're not out of it yet. So
they're currently topping Pool A as expected. It's Ireland and South Africa in Pool B and England Samoa in Pool D. You know, Samoa has only played one match. It's a bit weird, the Rugby Union World Cup weeks to rounds and stuff.
It's a lot to keep up with, isn't it?
Well, they don't highlight very easily the rounds and stuff like that. It's got another, I think, 3 weeks to go before the end of the group stage, pool stage. Australia really has to stand up, 2 more games to play, otherwise Eddie Jones is in a lot of trouble.
Yes, absolutely, John.
And so you want to talk about the Davis Cup?
Yes,
I didn't even know the Davis Cup was on. I would have thought you would have told me last week.
Yeah, sorry about that. That one got in under the radar, but we've picked that up now. I know the cricket wasn't good news and the rugby wasn't good news for Australia, but we do have some good news, John, and that's that Australia beat Switzerland 3-0 to lock in their spot in the Davis Cup quarterfinals to be held in November. In that tie, Tanasi Kokonakis and Alex De Minaur both won their singles in straight sets.
Great.
Matt Ebden and Max Purcell won the doubles in straight sets, so a clean sweep from the Aussies over Switzerland. The skipper, Leighton Hewitt, though, John, he's not happy with the new Davis Cup format at all. He said it's been a 4-year disaster, the new format. So the old format of playing ties at home and away over best of 5 sets, that was scrapped in 2019, John, and it's now been replaced by, just a 3-set format and just held in 1 week at the end of the year in one location, John. I think Leighton makes a good point. So Australia essentially can't play Davis Cup at home anymore, John. That's a real concern. So they now just have to go to one location at the end of the year. Leighton, he's got a point, John.
Oh, I guess that'll come down to broadcast deal, ticket sales, things like that again. It's unfortunate that organisations make decisions based solely on profit margins. Did they give a reason why they changed it at the time?
I think it was just that there was a situation where they were just finding it really hard to attract the best players to it because it was scattered over the course of the season. We all know what the tennis calendar looks like. It's just mayhem. There's events going on all over the world at any given time. So I think the thinking was that if we just have it for 1 week at the end of the year, it'll be a lot easier to attract these top players who are reluctant to play under the old format. It hasn't really helped, John, I don't think.
No.
Players are still reluctant to play in it. It has a lot of trouble attracting the biggest names of the sport. Good news for Australia, though. They made the final last year at the event. They lost to Canada, but that was a great performance, and they're into the quarters again this year. So well done to the Aussies, and they don't have, Nick Kyrgios, so that they're working without him. So well done to Tanasi Kokonakis, Alex De Minaur, Matt Ebden, Max Purcell, and to Leighton as well. Well done to him. It's great that he's still so involved and so passionate about it.
Yeah, he's done a good job with the Davis Cup, I think.
Yeah, there's another reason for Leighton to be happy as well, John. His 14-year-old son, Cruz Hewitt, claimed the first professional wins of his career in Darwin last
14?
week. Yeah, he beat a 25-year-old in his first match. Then he beat a 21-year-old before he bowed out of the tournament. But a great effort from the 14-year-old Cruz Hewitt, so come on to that, John.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome if he goes on to become something big in Australian tennis.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, 14 years old, give it
14.
5. Give it 5. Because Leighton, of course, I think beat Andre Agassi when he was only 15.
Yeah.
So is Cruz Hewitt about to... we don't want to put pressure on him at this age, obviously, but Yeah, the signs are good for Hewitt Jr. here, John.
Tennis is such a young man's game that lasts through to old man.
Yeah.
15-year-old through to 36.
Well, Leighton actually played 20 Australian Open straight. He played from 15 until the age of 34, I think. So there you go.
Yeah, that's what I love to see actually with tennis, the fact that they'll be around for 20 years. And I hope he's around for 20 years.
There you go, John.
Well, that's sport for the week. But, I just want to... We're getting some traction on Facebook.
Okay.
I'm loving it, actually.
This will be interesting.
So, it's really funny because we've posted so many clips on Facebook, and the one that's getting the most talk is the one where we discussed Latrell Mitchell and whether Russell Crowe needs to, call in and have a talk to the club.
Yes.
And it's really good because, of course it's rugby league, so some fans hate the Rabbitohs, some fans are diehard. Rabbitohs, I think more than any other club, polarises fans.
I think the Roosters are up there with them, but I think you got a point.
I love the support is things like people commenting like, "Who cares? It's beautiful to watch the implosion."
I know you enjoyed it, John.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then of course we got the in between things, which actually I was looking at this one because if you comment on the post, I'm happy to go look for stuff that you're talking about before I make any comment to it. So one of the things, because we did give it to the Rabbitohs over the course of a couple of weeks, and the fact that all their off-field drama seemed to cause them to implode. But actually, they did have quite a few injuries during that period too. Latrell being obviously their most, their biggest one. At one point, they had 8 players out for a couple of weeks, which, yes, is a contributor. I admit, put my hand up and admit that it wasn't just Latrell who caused the off-field dramas. But I really love these guys, the negative ones. I'm not going to jump on and argue with people, but I have a microphone and you will listen to everything I say. Adam Sandler, the wedding singer.
Yeah, exactly. We just hope they keep listening, John.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Please continue.
I don't like this comment that people will make about how, you shouldn't be allowed to have an opinion because you've never played rugby league professionally. That's one of the...
Well, the thing is, John... The opinion's either got merit or it doesn't. Whether you've played games or not is irrelevant. I mean, you could never have played a game in your life, but your opinion has merit. On the other side of it, someone who's played 300 NRL games could make an opinion and the opinion's got no merit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's the fact that you've played and stuff like that has absolutely nothing to do whether the opinion exists.
No, and often it's a case of... this is a thing, John, I'll go a bit deeper into it. I mean, a lot of journalists you listen to and ex-players or whatever, a lot of them, especially with journalists, they're not going to tell you what they really think a lot of the time because they've got sources who look after them, who leak stories to them. So a lot of the time, what people have got to keep in mind is a lot of the time when a journalist is saying this or that about a player, praise, criticism, whatever... A lot of it's to do with, is this person leaking information to them or not? Does the journalist get along with this person or not? So that's the thing. We don't have that issue, John, because when we're not dealing with we don't have to deal with players. We don't have to deal with coaches. So we've got none of those agendas. We're just calling these things as we see it. As I say, players, coaches who journalists deal with, you don't know, and a lot of the time it's not just whether they're leaking stories. A lot of the time, players and coaches will background journalists, feed them information, and in return, the journalist will write nice things about them. So there's these agendas that people need to be aware of. We don't have them, John. Yeah,
no, I just like I said, I don't think it's like having played. I played rugby union when I was in high school. Doesn't mean I'm an expert on rugby union just because I played once. I do obviously understand this thing. When Cameron Smith says something about form, how a rugby league game goes, something like that, obviously he's I'm going to listen to him, but it doesn't mean I don't have the right to my own opinion.
Yeah.
Because that's what an opinion is.
Yeah.
It's something that we all have rights to.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We're going to try and, on this podcast, we're going to try and entertain people. That's what we're here to do. It's not going to be boring, I can tell you that. We're going to have provoking discussion like we've had today. We don't have to have played to to bring that to you, to deliver that to you.
If anybody, no matter how much of a diehard fan you are, if you think the Rabbitohs did well this year, you perhaps got the wrong coloured glasses on, because they did terribly. They were leading the ladder in round 11. This is a fact. They're the first team ever to miss the finals after leading the ladder in round 11. Again, a fact. They had a whole bunch of off-field dramas, which is factual.
Yeah.
Yes, they had some injuries and apparently some origin issues. I don't really think...
Only won 4 of their last 13 games.
That's a fact. Yeah. And so they had a fade, and we looked into... We have our opinion as to why, and one of the majority contributing factors, my opinion, is that there was too much off-field drama surrounding Latrell Mitchell. You know, I mentioned last week, I think he gets picked on a bit more than other players. Was it last week? Yeah, last Thursday. But fact of the matter is, Rabbitohs sucked this year. I celebrated.
That's right, John. Yeah, well, it's, you just look at the ladder, don't you?
Exactly.
The ladder tells the story.
There's a numerical value that indicates how well they went.
That's all you need to do. Look at the ladder. And, you know, there's no way they'd be happy with the way they finished the season. And as I said... you know, might have been 2, 3, whatever, however many weeks ago, Russell Crowe needs some answers from Jason Demetriou. They need to have a look at it. And Jason Demetriou, he'd want to start well next season, otherwise he's going to be under some serious pressure.
What we've seen from this year is even if he starts well, that can still suck at the end of the year.
Yeah, well, that's right. Oh, okay, I'll take that back and say that he needs to have a good season in full next year.
Yeah, consistent 27 rounds.
And I would have thought top 8 finish is an absolute minimum requirement for him next season, John.
I think with their the players they have, they should be pushing for the top 4.
Yeah.
But yeah, anything less than a top 8 finish with good quality football at the end of the year, I would say that, you know, that's going to cost Jason Demetriou his job. And again, like that's an opinion, but it may become a fact.
We'll see what happens, Sean.
But you know,
next year will be
SmartB is a news and information website that provides news and information and opinions on sport, all things sports. So follow us on social. Like and subscribe on YouTube, at SmartB app for all of our social medias, and make sure you head to smartb.com.au for all of your sporting news and information and opinions.
Thanks, John. You did well to get through all that.
All right, we'll see you on Thursday for the previews. It's going to be a cracker weekend of sport again.
See you then.